Part 1. The Visionary Engineers. The young engineers, rejected by the world, built the first-ever national data center in Burkina Faso. Despite not receiving visas, scholarships, or job offers from global giants like Google or Meta, these young minds proved that they didn't need foreign approval to innovate. Their tech hub became a symbol of African resilience and ingenuity. The project was called Black Silicon Valley, and it was led by President Ibrahim Trayore. President Trayore didn't wait for help from the West. Instead, he turned to the young engineers of his country. The Tama Technology Center was born out of this belief that Africa could create its own future. He didn't turn to Google or the IMF. He trusted the youth to create a digital revolution right at home. Part 2. A Call to Build. Maine, once one of Burkina Faso's brightest tech graduates, had applied for an internship at Google, armed with perfect grades, an impressive portfolio, and revolutionary ideas. But the response came back cold, not eligible due to nationality. No feedback, no second chance, just a form letter. Devastated, he sat and cried, but then sent one final message to his best friend: "Maybe I have to leave my country just to be treated like a human." But then, something unexpected happened. A call came in from the president's office. On the other end of the line was President Ibrahim Trayore. He didn't offer him a visa, nor did he promise a Silicon Valley job. Instead, he asked a question: "Would you like to build something bigger than Google right here at home?" Without hesitation, Maine said yes. That moment marked the beginning of a quiet revolution. President Trayore began gathering young engineers from all over the world. Those who studied in France, Morocco, Tunisia, Russia, and those who once worked for Huawei, Meta, and Orange. These engineers, once overlooked by the world, were ready to change it. They all had one thing in common: they were underestimated because they were African. A 20-hectare lot on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, was cleared not for a golf course or tourists, but for a national data hub built from the ground up. Usman, one of the engineers, was appointed as the lead architect. The project was named Tama Technology Africaine de la Mémoire et de l'Autonomie, the technology of African memory and autonomy. It wasn't just a name, it was a mission. For the first 6 months, the engineers worked in brutal heat with no air conditioning, solar power only, and insulation made from corn husks and sawdust. There were no EU consultants, no UN experts, and no outside donors, just code, sweat, and belief. Part 3. Challenges and Backlash. Every line of code was a statement: we don't need permission to innovate. But soon the backlash began. The international tech giants didn't take kindly to Burkina Faso's audacious plans. Facebook sent a formal warning, claiming that Tama could threaten global data security standards. Google blocked API access from Burkina Faso. Microsoft suspended all software licenses linked to the project, and Amazon cut off cloud access without any prior notice. The media in the West ran coordinated headlines, accusing Burkina Faso of adopting China-style digital control, and raising concerns about privacy, terrorism, and the African blockchain project. President Trayore was accused of political weaponization of technology. But President Trayore didn't flinch. He issued a decree. From now on, all government data, health, education, finance, and identity must be stored on national soil. No exceptions. No compromises. A European Union official called, asking for flexibility. Trayore's response was simple and direct: I don't negotiate over the memory of my people. As the pressure from Western powers mounted, the IMF threatened to review its support for Burkina Faso's digital development, and software companies pulled out of contracts. The U.S. trade delegation canceled talks. But instead of backing down, Usman and his team doubled down. They fully integrated Tama with the country's core systems: smart IDs, school records, medical histories, and land ownership. Everything was now securely encrypted, local, and immutable. A child born in Burkina Faso would grow up with a secure, national digital identity, not managed by Silicon Valley but by their own country. A senior official from the African Union toured the data center, stood in silence for a moment, and then said, "I don't know if this will replace Google, but I do know it's rewriting the meaning of sovereignty." Part 4. Africa's Digital Sovereignty. The most surprising part of this story wasn't the code or the technology. It was the people behind it, ordinary African engineers who didn't graduate from Harvard or intern at Facebook. They weren't invited to the World Economic Forum in Davos. But they built something that no one dared to: a tech system that serves Africa, answers to Africa, and belongs to Africa. At a press conference, a Western journalist asked, "Mr. President, do you plan to compete with Google?" Trayore paused. He looked straight into the camera and calmly responded, "No, I want my people to exist online without needing Google's permission." That one sentence spread like wildfire across African social media. It wasn't a challenge, it was a declaration. Africa was waking up. With Tama now running smoothly, the next phase of the project began. The government began uploading core national records, birth certificates, school transcripts, health records, land deeds, and tax history, all available to citizens at the click of a button. There were no lines, no waiting for paperwork, and no bribes. Everything was securely recorded on a blockchain, built by Burkinabe engineers for Burkinabe citizens. It was more than just a tech upgrade, it was a full-blown cleanup. Then something even bolder happened: digital education for all. The Ministry of Education launched a program to teach coding in public schools starting from grade 5. Rural students were given locally made tablets, connected to a closed learning network called AfriNet. It wasn't about YouTube, Facebook, or advertising. It was about coding, robotics, design, and ethics. By the age of 10, some of these students were already building chatbots and simple games. In 2025, a group of 9th graders from Kaya won a regional tech competition in Ghana. They built a voice-based learning app for blind students to do math problems on an old Nokia phone. No one expected it. No one saw it coming, but they came anyway with code, not complaints. To support this rising generation, Trayore signed a decree to turn 100 hectares in Dori into the site of the Sankura Tech Academy. It would become a training ground for the next wave of African engineers and tech experts in areas like AI, satellites, clean energy, blockchain, and hardware. Meanwhile, the international response grew louder. Facebook and Instagram were banned from public systems in Burkina Faso, including schools, hospitals, and government offices. No more ads, no more surveillance, no more tracking pixels. In their place, Burkina Faso launched its own social platform, AfriNet. It was a platform built in-house where people could chat, share, study, and organize without being manipulated by algorithms. No shady algorithms. No rage bait. Just humans talking to humans. At first, AfriNet was mocked as a sandbox for a poor country. But just 6 months later, it reached 5 million users, spreading into neighboring countries like Mali, Niger, and Guinea, as well as African diaspora communities in Europe. Meanwhile, a small group of engineers in Ouagadougou created their own search engine, Soma. It ran in native African languages, used AI that consumed 10x less energy, and respected privacy from the start. No ads, no tracking, no data sales. People started saying, "Soma makes DuckDuckGo look greedy." That's when Google filed a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization, WTO, accusing Burkina Faso of violating digital trade rules. President Trayore responded, "If protecting my people's data brings sanctions, then I accept those sanctions with pride." Back at a small rural school, a child typed his first program, "Print, Africa will not be coded by others." Far away in a boardroom in San Francisco, an executive sat back and whispered, "What if we've underestimated them?" In Ouagadougou, President Trayore made an announcement that no one expected. "Our first satellite, BiNet-1, is now active." It wasn't a military satellite, nor was it built to spy. BiNet-1 was a satellite designed to serve the people, tracking weather, climate, crops, health data, and natural disasters. A French journalist asked, "Will the data be sent to Paris?" President Trayore smiled and answered, "No. From now on, our data orbits within our own skies." With BiNet-1 in place, Tama entered its second phase. It could now sync with real-time satellite data on crop conditions, rainfall, deforestation, and population health. What was once a national infrastructure project became the nervous system of Burkina Faso, guiding smart farming, sending alerts about disease outbreaks, and providing sustainable agriculture strategies. In the same year, the first-ever electric vehicle, the IDIT EV, designed and built in Burkina Faso, hit the streets. The IDIT EV used local materials to withstand heat and dust, charged in 30 minutes, and had a 330 kilometers range. It was connected to BiNet-1, allowing drivers to avoid floods, ambush zones, and unsafe roads. People started calling it the African Tesla, but without Elon Musk. The boldest move came when Burkina Faso refused to sign a data-sharing deal with the EU, calling it a threat to digital sovereignty. The EU called it a threat to international cooperation, but President Trayore responded, "What kind of cooperation lets you watch my people without asking?" Shortly after, Burkina Faso hosted a tech summit and signed the Non-Colonial Data Pact with 12 African countries. This pact committed nations to reject foreign data storage without consent, co-develop local infrastructure for encryption and hosting, and create a firewall against digital colonialism. In the West, panic spread. Analysts warned, "We're losing access to African data. Without it, our AI systems can't train." Trayore went live on national TV. "They're not afraid of lost revenue. They're afraid of losing informational control." Part 5. A new future begins. As Burkina Faso pushed forward with its national tech transformation, the rest of Africa began to take notice. The groundbreaking Tama Technology Center wasn't just a tech hub, it became a symbol of digital independence. For too long, African nations had relied on foreign servers and foreign-backed systems. But now, Burkina Faso was leading the way with its sovereign data and national tech infrastructure. The first phase was complete, and Tama was stable, secure, and resilient. The next challenge was to ensure the sustainability of this tech revolution. President Trayore understood that the youth were key to the future. It was time to invest in the next generation of engineers, creators, and innovators. With Sankuratech Academy under development, Burkina Faso made a bold move, teaching coding to every child in public schools. This initiative was not only about digital literacy, it was about empowering Africa with the knowledge to shape its own destiny. By 2026, Burkina Faso's children were already building apps, creating algorithms, and experimenting with machine learning in classrooms. But the world wasn't ready for this level of disruption. Countries across Europe and the United States watched as Burkina Faso became the blueprint for digital sovereignty. It wasn't just about technology, it was about power. As the first African country to fully digitize its public services and build a self-sustained digital economy, Burkina Faso had successfully flipped the script on technological dependence. Part 6. Building a Digital Africa. Soon, other nations began to look to Burkina Faso as a model for their own digital transformation. The Non-Colonial Data Pact, which had been signed by 12 African countries, began to expand, with more nations seeking to protect their own digital sovereignty. The idea that data should stay on African soil was catching on. And this wasn't just about protecting data, it was about reclaiming Africa's future. By 2027, Burkina Faso was leading a new wave of digital independence. The Tama blockchain had expanded across multiple countries, creating a pan-African firewall that protected African data from the prying eyes of global tech giants. With Soma, Afrinet, and Binet One, Africa was no longer a digital playground for tech giants. It was a global digital power in its own right. The African Union had embraced the Non-Colonial Data Pact, and even the United Nations was beginning to look at Africa as the new digital frontier. By 2030, Africa would not just be a consumer of technology, it would be its creator. The continent was on the verge of digital liberation, and it all started with one small, determined country, Burkina Faso. President Trayore had proven that Africa didn't need permission to innovate. From sustainability in farming to privacy-focused digital platforms, Africa was finally building its own future. A future that would be shaped by its own people, not by Silicon Valley.